Hello, and welcome to Irish Opera Podcast. This podcast is made possible by Blueberry.com. If you're thinking of starting your own podcast, head to Blueberry.com to get your first month of hosting for free with the offer code Irish Opera. That's a capital I, capital O, and no space. Irish Opera for your first month of hosting for free. A few dates for the diary. A new opera called Least Like the Other by composer Brian Irvine will take place at the Galway Arts Festival in July. Performances take place on Monday the 15th, Tuesday the 16th, Thursday the 18th, Friday the 19th, and Saturday the 20th. Performances start at 7 p.m. and run for approximately 70 minutes. So even if you're not from Galway, you might be able to catch this show. Tickets are available for €40, with concessions available at €30. Today we'll be talking to James Bingham, Irish National Opera's studio and outreach producer. Don't forget to follow us on social media, where we announce upcoming guests and you can submit questions you'd like them to answer. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us grow, you can subscribe for as little as $1 a month on patreon.com/Irish Opera Podcast. Alternatively, you can make a PayPal donation by emailing irishoperapodcast@gmail.com. Every little helps to cover the cost of creating and distributing this podcast. And now for this week's guest. Hi James, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Kevin?
Good. Enjoying this gorgeous weather.
It's not too bad.
No. So you're not just an administrator. You have an MA in choral conducting at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. So you have a musical education. What pushed you into this field?
So I've always been interested in getting people engaged in outreach, in opera and people outside of classical music. Sort of converting them to those kind of things, because I myself, when I was growing up, and the more and more I kind of hear this from people, is people don't necessarily kind of come to classical music immediately. Some people grew up with it in their lives, but when I was growing up, right until I was about sort of 18, 19, I'd never really listened to classical music at all. I thought it was this completely sort of dead art form that was kind of just a relic of the past, and there was nothing new to say about it. And it was just this assumption. The only thing that I kind of came across was occasionally stumbling upon Classic FM in the UK, and I just thought it was a bunch of violins, really. And that was this very kind of crude idea I had for a long time. But I was very interested in music over that period. So I used to the way I got into singing and all that was I used to front bands.
Okay.
So I was sort of in various bands. One band actually really
rock
modest.
Or
yeah,
pop
so I was in a rhythm and blues band for a while.
Oh, interesting.
It's deadly serious. I actually, the name of the band was James Bingham's Rhythm and Blues Experience, which is, how big an ego do you need? Seriously. So,
you have to have a bit of an ego to get in front of a spotlight.
Well,
I think, don't you?
Yeah. But I loved performing and kind of just rolling around on stage and just having a crack, really. So I always had this interest in music. But as I say, no interest in classical music.
Yeah.
Then I got involved in singing in choirs, and I remember hearing it was with the Halle Youth Choir was kind of my first kind of experience of getting involved in any kind of serious classical music. And I remember hearing the Halle Orchestra live for the first time, having never heard a professional orchestra before, and literally kind of within the space of one summer, like it's kind of like mind blown moment. I was thinking, this is extraordinary. I was always up for listening to new music of anything I came across that was new to me. I'd be interested in. But I was thinking, well, oh God, there's like 500 years of music out there that I've been rejecting, and I'm really sort of intrigued to hear what this is. And that experience was so significant for me that I kind of have since looked back on it, and really I went on and studied music at Sheffield, and when I was there I was a choral scholar. And again, thrown in the deep end, kind of learned all about kind of the choral evensong tradition that's so big in the UK, particularly in England, and immersed myself in that. And then I got involved in an outreach project that they had there called Sing, which is part of Sing Up, which is a big government initiative.
Sing what?
Sing Up.
Oh,
so it was that was a big government initiative a few years
actually,
ago.
I think they do that in Belfast.
Yes, yeah. So it's evolved since then. They still have kind of like a song bank of resources and stuff, but it doesn't have the same government funding that it had when it was first around. And so Sheffield had its own kind of strand of that took place at the cathedral, and I got involved in their outreach work because one of the other lay clerks there, who's a good friend of mine, he said, I just think you've kind of got the personality to do this. I thought, well, a bit of extra money, I'll go into some schools and do this.
Yeah.
And so in doing that, I was completely kind of blown away by this, how satisfying I found to kind of engage with young kids and get them engaged in singing and see the transformation that happened there. And so going back to what I was saying before about that experience I had that summer where all of a sudden I was just immersed in classical music, I thought, wow, I really want to kind of create this experience for as many people as I can. And I thought, well, I'm just going to make it my career goal, really, just to kind of, in whatever way I can, engage people in classical music and give the option to people there. So that's how I first started getting into this area. So, and sort of following on from that, I ended up, as you say, I went to the Royal Welsh. Kind of the rationale behind.
And did you do an undergraduate in music as well?
I did a university undergraduate degree in music, so an academic degree. And then I got to the end of that and I thought, well, kind of the way my philosophy was shaping up in terms of how you engage people with classical music was, well, it's all about quality. I mean, I'd heard classical music, I'd heard, youth wing bands and those kind of things do performances, but that stuff hadn't really inspired me in any kind of way. Because good music is good music and it speaks for itself, and this is something that I see all the time. Is when you see that there's always this moment when you put a bunch of people in front of a professional opera singer for the first time, and just the sound that comes out of them, that proximity and stuff. I can talk about how amazing classical music is, but to actually just be exposed to that is so extraordinary. So,
and young kids are often kind of not brought to things like opera and stuff because they think, oh, it'll be too long, or it'll be, it's too much for them, or it's not very easy to access or whatever. But actually, I went to my first opera when I was 10 years old. Now, obviously, I ended up working in opera, so maybe I'm a slightly different case. But I went to my first opera when I was 10 years old, and I was absolutely blown away. I cannot remember the name of it, but I remember it was Baroque, because I remember I spent the first half of the opera wondering whether it was a man or a woman, because it was counter-tenor, and I had no clue.
That's always, counter-tenors like blow people's minds.
I was so confused. I was going, but it looks like, I don't know. And then you see, I had been singing for a few months with a singing teacher in Limerick called Olive Cowper at that stage. So, I kind of knew a little bit about different voices, and I knew that, mezzo-sopranos sometimes did trouser rolls. So I'd heard some of the other students do like Cherubino and stuff like that. So I kind of was like looking at this, and I was like, I was so confused. But I'd never heard a countertenor before. But that is like my first memory. But what I do remember about it is that I was absolutely like enthralled, and it was an opera theatre company tour that came to the Bell Table. And I remember it was just the sound world and the excitement of all of the different colours that you get from an orchestra. And obviously it was reduced because it was a touring production, but it was still so exciting and so engaging. And I was like, when I look back now and, I look and see people at 10 years of age and so many people dismiss them as being unable to receive what is on stage in front of them, but they actually, they do.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about that, because that's, clearly something that's quite vivid in your mind, of an experience that's had an impact in your life in a way that's led to your career. And Opera Theatre Company were producing good quality opera. And that's the fundamental thing, is you expose people to quality. And that, I think, is really, really important to the centre of kind of all outreach work that we do, is just getting people to hear the very best, which is why it's really important that we have within institutions that are centres of artistic excellence, such as IO, producing outreach projects like this. And so that was, going back to the Royal Welsh, that was my rationale going there, was that I went and studied choral conducting there, because that's what I knew at the time. I wasn't really that engaged in opera at that point in my life. But I thought, it's really important that I should interrogate my own artistic integrity. And because I need to make sure that how we're engaging people has that integrity. So I went and I trained there for 2 years with Neil Ferris, who's BBC chorus master now. like a really amazing 2 years. Then kind of through that sort of was engaged in operas. As I'm sure you know, when you're in a conservatoire, there's kind of operas sort of happening somewhere at any given time because there's just a number of singers, and there's these things. So I made friends with a bunch of singers, and we ended up sort of doing a few operas whilst I was there. I was involved in some of those, and then I ended up going and working at Glyndebourne, and then going into that side of things. But my remit has always been, as you were saying before, about my role here is chiefly administrative, but it has artistic elements because I'm not necessarily fussed about what it is that I actually do. It's more about what the end goal is. It's how can we engage more people. So when I was at Glyndebourne, I was there in very much an office job. When I was at Opera North, I was there working in an artistic capacity, and now
so you're a choral delivery artist at Opera North. What does that mean?
I think I always think it's such a funny title. It sounds like I'm sort of a postman or something. Choral delivery artist, So that job was, they've got quite a unique model at Opera North. I remember when I had my interview here, which is in the room we're in at the moment, I said to Fergus, the department I'm in at the moment has 30 people in. To put that into context, there's 10 people who work for INO full-time in the whole company. But in the department alone at Opera North, there was 30, I think there's more than 30 actually thinking about it. And once I said that, and I sort of carried on saying a few more things, and then Fergus said to me, he's like, sorry, I've forgotten the next question because I still can't quite get over that figure of that many people working. But the way it worked was that in the same way that you have in many major opera houses, you have a team of repetitors who are on the books there and work for the company. You have a musical director and you have a head of music. They also had a similar kind of structure for their education department. So I was there working as a conductor for all their kind of vocal programs. So it was myself and one other guy, and between the two of us, we kind of did the vast majority of the vocal delivery for the education department Opera North. So at the time when I was there, I was working with 1,000 children a week.
Wow.
In rehearsals,
and was that constantly changing over, like different school programs, or?
So we had at various points there would be kind of these sort of arcs of projects that would have a kind of finite period of time. We used to do these engagement programs. They were called the Big Sing, where you'd go to schools, and it was a bit of a kind of CPD session, so continuous professional development, where I'd go in, do 2 hours teaching this piece of music to a bunch of kids, and then we'd leave that with the teachers and say, now you need to kind of keep this going for 6 weeks or so, and then we're going to come back and we're going to see where you're at with it, and we're going to give you resources, and we're going to be here as a constant kind of source of support. And then we'll put the whole thing together, and we'll get in an orchestra, or get the Opera North chorus in, or something like that. So then, again, that thing I'm saying, they get to sing with a professional orchestra or a professional chorus and those things. So there's things like that had a kind of finite period. But then there was more regular things. So I conducted the children's choir whilst I was at the Opera North Children's Choir. And so they had kind of gigs throughout the year that we were working on. Probably the most interesting project there, which probably gets kind of most attention, is called In Harmony. So that's kind of a national scheme that was the initial inspiration for this, which has now been it's moved away from this significantly. Was the El Sistema program in Venezuela. Now Venezuela's got problems, so those kind of things.
Are definitely at the moment.
But I don't know if you know much about El Sistema, but it's a program that was kind of sort of world renowned, so still is world renowned, for music education. Probably its most famous alumni is the conductor Gustavo Dudamel, but it was working in communities within favelas with children in these kind of nuclear programs. So they'd come to these sort of community centres, for lack of a better word, and that's where the Simon Bolivar Orchestra came out. Now that was a really amazing model, and people were blown away by it. And so what happened was lots of nations sort of took inspiration from that and tried to create sort of models that worked for their nation. And what happened in the UK was In Harmony. And so the way In Harmony works is that there are a number of these centres around the UK of sort of cultural institutions. So Opera North was one of them. The Liverpool Phil was just down the road from us as well, that did In Harmony. And they were tied to a number of schools. So when I was there were 3 primary schools. I think that number's gone up now. I think there's a 4th, and there may be a secondary school as well. And every child in that primary school learnt a string instrument. And they also had group singing sessions with me. So I'd go in every week and work through the school throughout the course of a day with them. And then we'd have concerts for them. So sometimes there'd be small internal concerts, sometimes there'd be concerts with the orchestra of Opera North. There'd be a variety of these opportunities. But it was a really, it was hard work, that job, because just the numbers of kids to kind of deal with.
You have to have so much energy and to keep them engaged.
Yes, It's sometimes I sort of think of it. It's almost like sort of it's more like jazz than it is classical music, because you're kind of being so responsive to things in the room to make sure that the energy is flowing the whole time. You just have to be so perceptive to where these kids are, what the temperature of the room is, literally, and how much energy these kids have, whether something's happened earlier on in the day that means that they're all elsewhere or something like that. And to make sure that you're constantly kind of engaging with them. It's a challenge often, and this is the trap sometimes I think that a lot of people who work in this line of work find, is that you're there's a temptation to be sort of fun. What I mean by that is that when you're rehearsing, you can sort of fall into trap being a bit of a stand-up comedian and just be kind of charming and all those kind of things, but actually not really kind of crack on with making music. And again, what I was saying before is actually you have to treat the kids with the same amount of respect as you would a professional orchestra. Is that you have to say, well, the music comes first, guys, and you've got to work. And that doesn't mean that you have to be, just rude to them or anything like that. You always, in any circumstance, have to be cordial and nice to people that you're working with, but it's about leading with quality music making. And I've always found that if you lead with quality music making, regardless of who these kids are, they respect that a lot more than just you being silly.
And next year's season includes Hansel and Gretel. So I remember we were talking about a month or so ago, and you were looking for different choirs and stuff. Will some of that kind of experience come into it, or will that be part of your role in INO to do that as well? Yeah,
so there's definitely, in terms of, there's always this thing that comes in with opera of there are moments where you actually need physically a group of children to be in an opera. So, as you say, Hansel and Gretel's one, Carmen as well, Turandot, there's Bohème, there's a good number of them that require these children's choruses. Definitely, I think having a participatory element of bringing kids to opera by them being part of this experience is absolutely part of my remit. And making sure that you've got kids who are capable of doing this work, which is really important, because you don't want in any way to kind of sacrifice the artistic standards for the sake of saying, oh well, isn't this a nice thing we're doing? We're giving children opportunities, because actually that's very patronising to the children, just as much as it is not going to be of those standards. You need to make sure that you train these children to be of that kind of quality. So that's kind of part of what it is that I do, is kind of, but it's also about giving them an experience that is engaging and means that they have these experiences. I've got friends who've done those roles when they were younger, and now are in careers in operas because of those things.
Well, I mean, I myself actually was in summer music on the Shannon years ago, which was this kind of summer camp or whatever of opera for children. So when I was like 12 years old, I did Noah's Flood. That was the first one.
I mean, that's a classic. That's a magnum opus for my world of stuff. So.
So like I sang Sem in that, and then when I was 13, I did Hansel and Gretel, and I did The Sandman. And then the 14, we did The Green Children, which I don't know if you've heard of, but it's by a British composer, I think, and it's basically all kids, mostly anyway. And but they had a program that got people involved in opera at a really young age, and unfortunately over the last number of years it's kind of fizzled out a bit because recession came and so I kind of happened to be around at a good time, because it started in 2002 and it kind of wrapped up then around the recession. They weren't able to get the same amount of funding and stuff. But it was a really great introduction to opera for me and for so many people who didn't necessarily go into it. Not everyone went into it, but they, they came out of it being like, oh, it's not so alien, it's not so
absolutely. And there's a whole, you sort of touched on a thing there, that there is this whole kind of almost subgenre in opera now of community operas and youth operas and these things that are specifically written with engagement in mind. And so are designed for people who are amateurs, for lack of a better word, to take part in. And Neuer's Flood is, as I say, is a sort of bit of a magnum opus for those guys. That's not the right term, but you know what I mean. It's probably the most significant of those. I mean, the thing I think is really cool about Neuer's Flood, which I think is very important to bear in mind when you're working with people who aren't professionals, is that he insisted, Britain, that the amateur orchestral parts they had to be played by amateurs, and that wasn't for any kind of tokenistic, patronising reason. It's because he literally wants that sound that you get from an amateur orchestra, which can only be uniquely created by an amateur orchestra, unless professionals really trying to hard sabotage it. But the spirit of that, I think, is really fantastic, because what it's saying is you're not patronising people. You're not saying, okay, well done, given the circumstances, you're doing
good attempt.
Yeah, exactly. And we as Irish National Opera, aren't we great for engaging with this community and stuff? Because I don't think that's cool. And instead, what this does is it's looking at, well, what is it that you can uniquely bring to our production that we can't create?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is true community engagement.
Yeah. I was reading your blog, actually.
Oh, God. My not very prolific blog. But yeah.
Well, there's 3 posts, but 3 very good posts, but definitely would like to hear more.
Yeah.
You said in your blog, I spend a good portion of my working week teaching opera arias to primary school children. I'm going to assume that Michelle, and that's Michelle Dewberry, wouldn't class my work as not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting because, because here in Ireland, we actually have quite a broad education. I think we do it relatively well. I mean, if you look at the Leaving Cert, students have to do 6 subjects, and more often than not, they do around 8, and some even very ambitious people do even more again. And not everything will be directly useful, but it certainly gives a wide understanding of the world outside our field. But opera is not encountered in our schools here. How do you hope to reach out to young students? How can we actually, it's not in our educational syllabus. And I would never have discovered opera only for the fact that, I got a call one day being this artist wants a young boy soprano at an art exhibition to open it. And, so a singing teacher got in touch with me, and then it all kind of went from there. But I never encountered it in primary school, and even in secondary school. The music syllabus, it does introduce classical music, but it doesn't introduce opera really at all.
I mean, and actually there's certainly, when I was even an undergrad, as I said before, even then, when I was studying, that was a predominantly Western classical degree.
Yeah.
I kind of, I knew operas, and I'd seen a couple of operas, but I really was no, it's not really for me. But that's not because I decided opera wasn't for me, because, since then it definitely has been.
Yeah.
It's just that I'd not really looked at it. I often find opera, even in classical music circles, is kind of that next thing that people don't necessarily come to.
Yeah.
It's got even, classical music has its problems of these kind of really tired old tropes of elitism and stuff like that I just can't be bothered with those things anymore. But then opera seems to be sort of even further behind with those kind of things. You're right in terms of it is a broader education system in Ireland. One thing that I find fascinating is the transition year programme here.
Yeah.
This idea that you have a year off from studies to kind of just explore what you.
That was the year I decided I was doing music, because
that's
I was very good at maths and science and stuff, and that was my mindset. I wasn't particularly good at languages, but when I worked hard, I kind of got over it, But it was in transition year, having done 3 different work placements and going to an architecture firm and an
Right.
engineering firm and all this kind of stuff, I realised, no way can I be in an office.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not going to work for me.
Did you do any musical activity within that transition year?
Yeah, so in our school we used to do 2 of the extra kind of show things we used to do where we did a fashion show, and the students like produced the fashion show from beginning to end. So like in terms of going to the shops, getting the stuff, doing the fittings, you know, we all modeled, you know, people were involved in the technical aspects as well. And so, you know, it was quite a well-rounded actual program, and then we did a musical theatre piece as well. So we did Oklahoma.
And again, was that the same thing with the tech all done by the kids?
So no, the lighting and the sound and stuff for that was actually done by the people that they brought in. But yeah, like I mean, if you weren't musically after something, they would find something else for you to do. Whether it was like, you know, writing the programs, editing the programs, putting out stuff on the newsletter, and you know, so there was other aspects to it as well aside from the performing. But I do think it is I cannot stress how important that year was, because that year I was like, okay, I've finished my junior cert, you know, that's one academic hurdle over, which is like the GCSEs, and then, you know, I was like, okay, I can use this year to focus on my music. And so I did like 2 exams in my instruments that year. So and I took up a new one because I was like, oh, I really like the clarinet.
But do you know what I mean? Like that, you doing that is like, even though you're not a clarinet player now, I mean, as far as I'm aware, I don't know. Do you still play clarinet? Yeah. But those kind of experiences, even though they don't necessarily apply to your job, even if you didn't get involved in opera at all, still have those kind of very unique experiences can have a real impact. And I
think it gives you such an understanding. Like, I mean, obviously that's directly related to music, the instruments, but it does give you a greater understanding of, you know, the people that you might be with. So, you know, if you're singing and it turns out that there's, you know, some kind of harmony or counterpoint or dialogue with the orchestra, you kind of have a better idea of how it might work, I think, sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, it gives you a sense of empathy as well when you're in those things of if you spent some time playing a clarinet and you're there singing with an orchestra, you've got at least some kind of inkling of what's going through, and that exercise of empathy is so transferable anywhere. And the thing that I think is really cool about when you're saying, well, everyone they found a role for people, even if they weren't necessarily on stage, you know, right in the middle of Oklahoma doing "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning," is that I think it's, again, what I was saying before about you can talk and talk and talk about these things, but actually when you crack on with doing them, it's a lot more powerful. And there's often a problem with, I think in the arts, of the way that professions are kind of categorised, and the way that we talk about a career in music. It's, you know, you perform or you teach and there's nothing else. And you know, like the job I have is kind of really weird. You know, I have trouble sometimes. I remember once my mum said to me, I think it was when I started Opera North or something, she's like, so what is it you actually do, James? She wasn't like, she's like,
well,
are you a teacher?
Listen to this podcast.
Well, but yeah, you know, are you a teacher? Well, no, I'm not. But okay, so are you a conductor? Well, I sort of, but I'm not. You know, I'm not conducting operas or anything like that. You know, and these kind of nuances, you know, are often quite difficult to explain unless you have a lengthy podcast. You know, and so it's giving these kind of diversity to people, and with this fashion show, there's all these different roles going off, and then people think, okay, well, actually, there's all these other roles going off here that actually are just as artistic and demand just as much creativity. I mean, there's no way I could do this job if I didn't have a background in opera. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Like, it's really, really important. And
well, if we look at any of the kind of governmental departments and stuff as well, like if we look at the HSC and all these kind of things, you know, one of the complaints is that so much of the administration doesn't actually have an understanding of what, you know, say nurses have to do or whatever.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you kind of need to know something to be able to, you know, make it work.
Yeah, I mean, that is the, I mean, that's the farce. I mean, I can talk talk for hours about the British government and the way that for the whole of my...
We won't go down into Brexit today. There's enough of that.
But the whole time in as long as I can remember politics, I've always had this bizarre kind of, it's found it perplexing that you have like a Minister of Culture who has got no background and they move around in these different positions without actually any inkling of what it is they're doing, and they become like health minister. Like Jeremy Hunt was, he's now going to as Prime Minister. Before that, he was Health Minister, he was Culture Minister. You think, okay, like me personally, I've got a bit of expert in culture. There's no way I'd ever have any experience in health. I don't know anyone, unless there's any...
Well, there's that famous post that goes around Facebook all the time, and it's about the ministers in Canada, because like it goes through all of them, and it says...
They've actually...
Yeah, it's like, the person for education was actually a teacher, and the person for health was actually
That's Canada for you, isn't it? They're so smug there.
They're lovely, we love them all.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
But so we've talked quite a bit actually about the outreach. But for people who aren't like ourselves and obsessed with the inner workings of an opera company, what is the opera studio? That's your other kind of main charge.
Yeah. So a lot of opera houses throughout the world have a studio program, which is basically very loosely, it's a scheme to develop young artists who are up and coming, and we want to give them extra opportunities. Now, one thing I really like about working at INO is that there's very much a philosophy here of kind of really nurturing and looking after Irish talent as a whole, and that's clearly something that's been on the books for a long time here, like predates INO in some kind of ways. You can see really, certainly in the last decade, the number of Irish opera singers that have performing on an international level it completely outweighs the size of the population.
That's true.
I remember going to literally, I know Suzanne Murphy teaches at the Royal Welsh, so there's a bit of a connection there, but I remember going to the Royal Welsh and I was like, who are all these Irish people?
I know, there's a lot.
There's so many Irish people there,
And there's a lot of people in Cardiff for some reason. I don't know what it is. But
it's Ireland's a nation that punches well above its weight, I think, operatically. The way the studio works here is that we have, this year we've got 8 artists on the programme. So we have 4 singers, a composer, a conductor, a repetitor and a director. They've been with us, it's just coming to the end of their year in a kind of scheme of development, really. So I've been building this programme for them. It varies in terms of what they do. They receive regular coachings, the singers. There's a series of masterclasses they have with singers. Some of the singers that we're working on the main stage. We've had like Paula Boyle and Paula Murray who've come and done sessions with our singers.
Tara Rock to one at the NCH.
Absolutely, that public one, and then we also have kind of special standalone projects. So earlier on in the year, I had them involved, some of them in an outreach project that we did called The Deadly World of Opera, which was designed to kind of lift the lid on some of the conventions around opera. And so myself and Sarah Baxter, who's our director this year in the studio, together wrote a script which was basically trying to unpack some of these myths. And we'd have a recitative sung, but before you had it sung, it would be spoken in English as a dramatic monologue, and sort of looking at so how does that translate across here, and sort of playing around with some of these qualities to try and understand why opera is appealing, because I think it's very easy sometimes. I know I keep banging on about quality and those kind of things, but it's very easy to just say, look, here's opera, appreciate it, But if you play Rheingold to a 5-year-old, then they're going to be a bit like, look.
I actually quite enjoyed how that was presented as well, The Deadly World of Opera, because instead of giving subtitles, things were explained before they sung. And what was nice about it was that you were actually completely focused on what they were doing then. So there was no kind of like, you can very easily, at least I do anyway, because maybe I'm a slow reader or something, but when I start looking at the subtitles a lot of the time, sometimes I can actually miss what's going on stage kind of thing. Whereas because we already knew what the intention was of the aria or the recit or whatever, and because we already had it kind of mapped out in terms of what it meant, it was really nice to see the performance just as it is. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, not to go too off piece, but that thing about subtitles is it's a good point, really. I mean, there is, I can't, you don't know the actual quote now, but I think David Pountney said something about this. There's always this disconnect because you're pulled out of the action, and it's when you're watching a film in a foreign language. The subtitles are part of the frame. Part of the product that you're watching. That's not really the case. With opera, and you're pulled out of it. And I'm still not convinced that there is. I think there is out there a more sophisticated way of doing these things. But I don't know what it is myself.
I mean, there was a lot of video used in The Second Violinist, for example, and I'm sure there are other ways of kind of integrating the text into the scene, and I'm sure it's been done.
Absolutely.
But and the other thing is, like, do you really need to know every single word? Like, because a lot of the intention comes across from the singer anyway. So if you have a snapshot of what it is, you can kind of gain the meaning.
Well, because the art of surtitling, I think, is something that's often really overlooked. I went to see The Nose by Shostakovich, I think it was about 3 years ago at the Royal Opera House. And they did that in English, but it was they chose at moments to have subtitles, but not the whole way through. Because there's so many gags in there. And there's always that really horrible thing when there's a joke
coming up too soon
before, and then everyone's going, oh, and it's it's the most nauseating experience around. But they were intentionally, whenever there was these gags that were going to be clearly audible, that they would be taken out of the surtitles, so you experienced it with them. And so there's very subtle things that can be done that I think really enhance those kind of performances. We went completely off piece.
We did a little bit, but sure, look, that's fine. Fergus mentioned when I spoke to him on the podcast a couple of months ago that some small-scale productions are kind of being thought about for some of the small theatres and in towns around the country, so like 200 theatres and stuff. Things that couldn't necessarily take, the large-scale full productions that would be on the Gaiety or whatever. Is it thought that maybe the studio would do some of that kind of work?
Absolutely. I mean, we are, as I say, this is our first year of the studio, so we're very much still in a kind of trial process of what the model is, and that will continue to develop, and I suppose will always be really, honestly, be developing depending on who we're working with, and you want to sort of tailor things to people.
And how the audiences grow and all the things that factor it.
Certainly as part of the studio program, I'm always keen to have these kind of additional projects that are making use of the studio artists and engaging them with beyond Dublin. That's a really, really important thing.
And even besides just the cities as well, because
absolutely.
We hear all the time actually in the news about how the pub is the centre of a village or a town in Ireland, and that it's the social place to be or the only thing to do, and there's so many small theatres around the country as well where there's not nearly enough going on.
I mean, I'm from the UK, and there's always been an issue there with centralisation. In the fact that London,
I think every country has that.
So I mean, some more than others. I think a nation like Germany does a very good job of managing that.
Well, they have all those kings to thank for all their 50 opera houses, don't they?
Indeed, But the way that they kind of spread their economy and the focus of where those things are is done quite a well thought out way. But it's still, there's issues with the East and West and those kind of things still. The UK definitely has a problem with centralisation, but Ireland, I think it's on another level, really. Because Dublin is such a metropolis. And outside of that, Cork is, it's minuscule in comparison, really. And then you
don't tell them that though.
It's lovely. Sorry, the people of Cork. It's lovely, but it's tiny. But the population is a fraction. And so it's important that we are getting out into these places because we literally are Irish National Opera, and it's really important we're going into these regions and engaging with these people because you're right, they need those resources, and I don't want opera to be something that is a Dublin-based thing. And I don't think anyone in this organisation does. But that's why that was one of the really exciting things. It's very tempting with a new opera company to start out with to kind of just do your big Toscas and all those kind of things. And it's great to do those things, doing Carmen next year in the Ball Gosh. But then it's also important that you do less well-known works, you do new music, and you do works that are touring around and engaging with people who aren't your traditional opera audience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the smaller theatres as well, as like kind of Fergus said it as well, was that, you do have the opportunity to do things that maybe won't get the same kind of audience numbers because it's new, it doesn't have a following, it's not a favourite opera of someone, or, but this past year, we've seen the studio members on the main stage quite a lot. Now, next year, that's not going to happen. But what kind of plans are in place? Will we see more things like the Deadly World of Opera? What, going forward, would you like to do?
So there's various plans at the moment, really, that I can't really sort of go into details of at the moment. But yeah, there's a variety of ways that we're looking at ways as well, how various ways of involvement for future studio members about how they're going to be engaged both on the main stage and on and in their own independent projects, because it's important that you have that bridge. I mean, that's our key asset, is we're also developing professional opera productions and getting people engaged with those the whole time is part of that process. But stay tuned.
We'll talk to you in a few months.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But because the INO studio is interesting in that it is a mix of singers and creative people.
That's pretty unique.
It is very unique, and so there is actually kind of an opportunity to collaborate and whatever as well, because this year it's conductors, we have a conductor, repetitor, we have a composer and a director. So I mean, it doesn't even necessarily mean that we'll have those roles again. We could have a librettist, we could have all of these other things.
Absolutely.
Is there kind of any scope for those people to collaborate and put on things? Because I see the studio as being very similar to what OTC had before, which was the hub. And, people like Andrew Sinnott and whatever, they kind of collaborated and then put on stuff. Is there going to be more of that with the creative team?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's really important to make sure that you're getting the right people working together. I think we want to avoid a situation where just because people are in the studio, we're getting them to work together, because maybe just because of what their skill set is and what they're interested in, those kind of things, that might not work. But if those things do work, but it's about giving these people opportunities. So it's as I said before, it's important that we kind of tailor these things to who we've got, so what they're looking for. And that will vary massively year on year. Particularly with singers, that's one thing, because you're very much in kind of receive mode, aren't you? You're kind of you're told what to do. Whereas to
an extent, anyway. We have some license, I think.
Some are better at being told what to do than others.
Well, that's for sure. No names.
Shouldn't have said that. These creative roles, really, it's about listening to people and responding to kind of what directions they're wanting to go in as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first year is almost over, and looking back, would you change anything? Have there been any things that you've learned this past year where you've been like, okay, that didn't really quite work, or maybe we could do this slightly better, or anything like that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's been really great to have a real variety of opinions from people, and they've experienced kind of a lot of working with lots of different artists. I think one thing that we're looking to do more of actually is to actually have people back more. The people that they're working with, to see them again further down the line. It's great to have these opinions for half an hour spent hearing them sing and stuff, but actually, where do you take that? That's all very well having these kind of modular kind of interactions and things, but actually, how do we have some kind of sense of retention? So we're very much more going towards that direction. And absolutely, one thing really important, I think, is about this collaboration in terms of just simply getting the studio together and feeling part of a studio, and they're not just a kind of collection of artists that we're working with on independent relationships. And that's been really nice, particularly in the process for the Deadly World of Opera. It was really lovely to see that team kind of sort of gel together and learn things from one another over the course of that. Because they've all got unique things to bring, and there's ways that they can learn off one another. So those are kind of the two key things.
Yeah. And the inaugural studio members will complete their year with a new opera composed by studio member Evangelia Rigaki, based on stories by Melatu Uche Okori. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
I tried. Can you tell us a bit about the show?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Evangelia, we said to her at the start of the year that we wanted we wanted to commission her to do something at the end of the year, and she was very interested in this idea. It first came about really with the idea of doors and kind of going through doors and experience, and this idea of also creating a space that people could freely move around. Almost, she talks about it like an art gallery. It's this installation thing, and people can go and observe one thing and then go to another thing. But we weren't sure exactly where the source of that story would come. Then their story came about, I think Fergus found it in the end, called This Hostel Life, which is actually a collection of short stories, which I think is a really great kind of model for something like this.
Yeah.
So you've got a collection of stories that clearly they're published together and they have a link, but at the same time they are modular stories. And so we're able to kind of move around and kind of deal with these stories and make sense of these stories in their own way. There's three stories, and there's also a sort of a forward as well, which is just as interesting, I think, as the three stories. One of them is about a really pretty harrowing ritual that takes place in Africa. Another one is a story that takes place in direct provision. Malatu was in direct provision for a number of years, so it's drawing on her experiences through there. The final one is basically, I quite like the way this works. Is this writing class, and this woman is in this writing class, sharing her story with the rest of these writers, and it's about their feedback to her on us, and what subtext is within that feedback. Which I think is really interesting, particularly given that we are doing an interpretation of this as well. So there's subtext there as well. So the way we're working is taking place in the crypt of Christ Church Cathedral, which is an extraordinary space. So the audience members will come down into the crypt, and we will experience these various encounters that are taking place throughout the crypt. So we have our 4 studio singers, and they'll be singing alongside instrumentalists from the Parabis ensemble, and also New Dublin Voices are going to be there as well, and they're going to be providing commentary. I don't want to say more than that, really.
That sounds like the third story.
And so audiences will have to kind of wander around and kind of make sense of these encounters that are happening simultaneously often a lot of the time. And we're really excited that Katrina McLaughlin is directing it, and Sarah Jo Shields a designer for it. So it should be a really exciting project.
Cool. I read an interview with Malatu on independent.ie, and they said that the average detention was 23 months in those centres. But she was there for 8.5 years. That's quite a long time.
It's extraordinary, actually. The piece itself doesn't necessarily deal about direct provision directly. We felt that wasn't necessarily the direction. It is extraordinary. It's something direct provision I didn't know much about. Being from the UK, we very different.
Well, I think it was happening for years, like before the public even realised it was happening to that kind of way.
This thing of the length of time people can spend there and not really knowing how long you'll be there as well, I think is.
And if you're going to be able to stay at the end, or what?
Just having that amount of uncertainty and is I think it must be extremely tough. I can't really comment on it. It's just extraordinary, really.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see this show anyway, and to
absolutely
and get some sense of how someone in that place feels, or what kind of impression they're getting when they come into the country first as well. But anyway, I think that's about everything. Thank you so much for doing this, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Great, lovely chatting with you.
Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your favourite podcast provider. Until next time, slán!